What should be important beyond just those three obvious ones? It sounds like it's much more involved.
Well, one of the things, you know, if you put it in the basketball environment, one of the things that the basketball committee looks hard at is what did you do with the portion of the schedule over which you had control? None of us have control of our conference schedule, but the portion that over which we have control should have something to say about how you're evaluated. Certainly how you fared, wins and losses, where you played the games. You know, oftentimes you get to 5 teams that all look alike, and you know, one of those teams went out and scheduled and won some games on the road, and another one didn't. That may be the determining factor. The problem with the comparison with the basketball selection process is that the numbers of teams selected are obviously very different, and the number of points of data is also very different. You know, you don't have 10 or 11 or 12 non-conference games on which to evaluate. You have 3 or 4 at the most, and you know how the postseason playoff in those leagues that have a playoff is valued. You know, should that be more important than the rest of the season's games? I think one of the things that they're saying is that one of the things we wanted to retain in the playoff is the quality of the regular season. No one can argue that the October and November in college football isn't the greatest regular season in college sports. I think likewise, it's very hard to argue that September is a great part of the college football season, other than the obvious energy and excitement about a new season starting. We have a lot of very bad football games, and some very one-sided mismatches. There are some good games too, but there are lots of institutions that are doing what they have to sell tickets and not much more. So I think there's going to be a balancing act there, and there are some striking similarities and some obvious similarities between this process and the basketball process, and there are some ways in which it is extraordinarily different. And quite frankly, that just hasn't been something we've spent a lot of time on just yet, but we'll need to.
Again, along those lines, should scores be considered? In other words, 59-20 win as compared to a 14-13 win against similar opponents, or should TV ratings be considered?
Well, I don't think point differential ever should be considered because it's obviously an inducement to run up the score and do things that are unsportslike, and so I don't think that should ever. But it's unrealistic to think that people aren't going to view a 38-10 win differently than they view 14-13, especially in a close game. And so, are the committee members going to look at that sort of thing? Sure. But I don't think they're going to, we should never put a premium on score differential. And so I'd be very surprised if we did. Now, site, you know, how do you weigh a close win at home versus a close win on the road by the same teams involving the same opponent? You know, those are things where you can certainly slice and dice.
How about who would be the best TV attraction? Should that enter in at all?
In terms of selecting the 4 teams?
Yeah.
No, I don't think it ought to. I don't think it ought to. You ought to earn it on the field, and there'll be some compelling stories. There's no doubt about that. I mean, everybody likes to watch the stories as the season evolves, but I think it has to be earned on the field.
You know, you laid out a lot of the things that the committee's going to be looking at or thinking about, and it sounds like there's, you know, a lot of them. The schedules of these schools are made out so many years in advance. So, like, what kind of time frame are we looking at now to where this committee can say, okay, this XXX, this is what you need? prior to the playoff actually starting in a couple of years? How much time do schools have to adjust?
We've got 3 subcommittees. There's a revenue sharing subcommittee, there's a site selection subcommittee, and there's a television committee. And we obviously have 24 semifinals and 12 finals to take to the marketplace, along with a bunch of other games. And so that's a big undertaking. The issue of site selection over a 12-year period, big undertaking. And you overlay it with the likelihood that many of the championship games will be played in venues that are shared with professional teams, and there are calendar issues, and it's a complex environment. And everybody has always believed that all the boats ought to rise from a financial standpoint, and so all of those are going forward on parallel paths. And there are also first negotiation, first right of refusals with some of our television partners and some of our current hosts. And so we have to, there's some things that have to be done in a linear fashion. And so by March, April, I'd hope we'd be pretty well finished with all of this. We know where the national championship game is going to be. We would know who's going to have the first semifinals. We would know what the sites are. I mean, that's really not a stake in the ground. It's not, Bill Hancock could better tell you than I could, but it seems to me it's reasonable that within 6 months we ought to have a lot of this stuff put together. I serve on the site selection and the revenue distribution, and we met last week, and we brought a lot of things to closure. Are we prepared to roll it out just yet? No, but this has a lot of moving parts. But it's a 12-year deal. We need to make sure we get it right. And more than anything else, we need to get it right for the kids on the field, for the coaches, and for the fans. I think this is an enormous step forward for college football, and it has the potential to strengthen the one portion of the schedule that is not as strong as it needs to be. It retains the traditional postseason within the bowl games, and it determines a national champion on the field from among the 4 most deserving teams. And that New Year's Day and New Year's Eve day and evening is going to be a spectacular celebration of college football. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Bob, the scheduling that you talked about for having teams be ambitious, I guess, it could be hard for some teams, especially financially, to get out of being teams, get into another one. For example, if they have a low BCS team, they have a chance to play a BCS team. Maybe they're going to have a good year, and they could enhance their schedule at the end of the year. It's a great decision. It could be hard for those schools. Could the Big 12 somehow help facilitate, whether making arrangements on the back end with other schools financially and like that? Could you guys involve yourselves just with further, I guess just to make this more possible than just, it sounds very easy, it's not. Could you guys help somehow?
I don't know. I'd have to think about that. That's the kind of thing that the conference ought to be at least considering. But I really haven't thought about it. It's a good question. And, as I said earlier, I don't think you have to play murderer's row. I think you have to develop a schedule that is going to be conducive to getting your team ready and also to demonstrating what you can do against intersectional competition. And for some institutions, that may just mean don't play any FCS schools. For others, it may mean you've got to play and beat some people from other top-ranked leagues in order to demonstrate that you're viable in the postseason.
Thank you, Commissioner.
My pleasure. Thank you all for coming.